I'm so glad you're joining me here today. I'm very excited about tonight. I'm going to start over. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I'm super excited about tonight's live webinar with Sandra L. Brown. If you haven't gotten your ticket, there is still tickets left. As I was working on her introduction for tonight, and I had suspected this, but wasn't for sure, but she actually is the originator of narcissistic abuse field as a whole. She's the first researcher, expert, clinician to define this whole realm of narcissistic psychopathic abuse. She's the OG. So this is who we're going to be interviewing tonight. I am so excited to be able to talk to her about that whole process, about what led to her to have this massive conclusion about abuse that led her to look into this topic, to go against conventional thinking about relationships, partners in relationships, and what happens between people when there's coercive, manipulative, exploitive techniques going on. What we're going to talk about today, because this is a common topic I wanted to get into, is I often get asked about therapy. So I want to sort of share from the beginning why a lot of therapists are poorly informed, even though when they don't mean to be, why they're out of the loop, and then how to be able to find more appropriate help, and even what kind of help is indicated after we experience a narcissistically abusive situation. So let me introduce myself, and then we're going to talk about this topic, and then the back half of today's live, if you stick around, I'd be happy to take your questions and address any issues that you might have regarding this topic or maybe another topic. But I'm Dr. Carrie Kerr McAvoy. I'm a psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. These days, I primarily promote awareness and information about narcissistic abuse. And so I'm so excited to join you. I have a lot of experience as a clinician. I was actually trained in the traditional model. So for me, this has been an awakening that I've had to go through. I've had to change the way I perceive what happens in relationships and how this can impact our sense of self and our sense of safety. So why do so many clinicians, psychiatrists, social workers, and psychologists don't know about narcissistic abuse? And what is actually the mindset? So let me kind of discuss how a psychologist or a clinician is trained so you can understand what's happening and why you're getting the bad information when you go seek help. And then we'll get into what kind of help you should seek and when, because there's some thoughts about that as well, some advice that I have for that. So when I went to grad school to become a psychologist, we approached it from a Western model. I want to first say that. So this is kind of a Western psychology. So you're going to hear this philosophy for European clinicians as well as North American clinicians, anybody who's been trained in a Western philosophy. We view you as a solely functioning individual and that you have the freedoms to choose your life, to set your boundaries, and to relate to whom you want to. So when you get into a relationship that something starts to go wrong, we view that as contingent on the degree that what your expectations are and how you're handling interdependence, which is a blend of, or kind of a mix between dependence and independence. Are you able to navigate the need of yourself against the need of the relationship? How do you manage your individuality against sharing yourself in an intimate experience? And this is a very kind of tricky situation for a lot of people. We're not always very good at navigating autonomy and individuality. And as a result, so clinicians then view that the goal of therapy is to help you get better at holding on to yourself in the context of a relationship, which is really hard. So that's a normal, healthy style connection. But in fact, if you came in and started talking to me, and this happened a lot, you came in and started talking to me about what your partner was doing wrong, I would redirect you to your piece of this relationship, the difficulty you're having holding on to the relationship, why you're not addressing the way that this is influencing you or scaring you or your emotional reaction or maybe the boundaries that you're holding or not holding. I would have looked at your difficulty of managing the intimacy in the relationship. I would have almost ignored. I would have kind of put out of my head the partner's interactions, because in my book, you're the client, the other person's not the client, they're not here. And I would have thought to myself, this is what we were trained, you see who's in the room, and I can't make changes to someone who's not in the room. So I would have felt that you were putting yourself in a very powerless position by focusing exclusively on your partner, because we can't make your partner behave better or be different or be nicer. We can only do with what we have, and you're in the room, so let's address you. Here's what we didn't understand, and why we didn't understand this, I don't know. I mean, now that I see it from a totally different frame, I feel like it's an obvious, like, wow, I feel stupid, to be honest with you. Despite the fact that we know your sense of self was shaped by your early experiences and your caretakers' personalities and the dynamics around that, we acted like once you became an adult, that process stopped. Isn't that weird? I don't know why we thought that. Okay, now you're a fully functioning self, even though how you came to define who you are was based upon how your parents saw you and the degree that they made you feel secure or insecure. But now that you're adult, that doesn't happen anymore. Like I said, it's now that you see it from a different perspective, it makes no sense. We fail to appreciate that this dynamic is continuing to occur in adulthood and for the rest of our lives. That you're never not being shaped by those around you. In fact, if you look at object relations theory, there's a British school of thought and the American school of thought, but some of the biggest writers have been Dr. David and Jill Scharf. Very odd last name. It's S-C-H-R, I think S-C-H-A-R-F or something like that. They've written, their books are huge. They're like tomes on the psychodynamic theory of personality. And one of the big topics that they talk about, I'm going to overwhelm you with some big terms, is projective identification and introjective identification. Those are two mechanisms that happen interpersonally between us and other people. So even though we'd been talking about the power of other people's emotions on ourselves, and we even know emotions are contagious, which is why we love to go to movie theaters, is because everyone's experience in the room affects your experience in the room. Somehow we ignored that when it came to relationship problems and couple problems and family problems. We acted like you're an adult, you should be high functioning, you should be able to completely shape your life experience. So why are you coming in and talking about this issue with somebody who's not in the room and I can't have any impact on? What we now know, though, and this is where Sandra Brown comes in, is Sandra Brown tonight. I'm interviewing Sandra Brown for a live webinar, and I'm super, super excited about it. It's called Could I Fallen for a Dangerous Man? I wish I had labeled it differently, because what it really is the real science of victimology, victim profile, and what happens in pathological love relationships, but all pathological relationships. So that's tonight. There's still tickets left. There's a link in my bio if you'd like to go. But Sandra Brown revolutionized the field. She said, wait. We are missing the fact that we are interdependent, and what happens we affect each other, we shape each other. And we've already known that when we were looking at Stockholm Syndrome. We recognize that when someone's put into a dangerous situation, where their life is contingent on keeping the captors happy, and whether or not they're even going to get a blanket to stay warm at night, they will butter up and actually, in a way, seem to fall in love with their kidnappers. Isn't that wild that we would look at these dynamics and yet we would miss the fact that I'm sorry, so much is happening here with this webinar tonight. I'm like, buzzing's going off and somebody's emailing me. Anyway, it's bizarre how we would recognize that this happens in infancy and all the way into adulthood, but we would ignore the fact that it continues to happen even in adulthood. So Sandra said, wait, we need to stop and really look at this relationship, look what happens in these dynamics and see whether or not that one person, if there's a power inequity, can impact the other person and affect their functioning level. And there you go. That's how we got into this whole topic of narcissistic and psychopathic abuse, relational harm. She calls it relational harm, that one person can set the tone and create such a toxic environment, such a dangerous environment, that the other person's functioning, even cognitive functioning, even the way that the degree that they're able to organize their life, see themselves, their sense of reality can be shaped by the one who's being scary, being intimidating, and being abusive. And there we ushered into this whole field. But this is a field that's not even, I think, hardly in its infancy. I mean, if we were to say, like, psychology as a whole, let's just look in perspective. Psychology as a whole really started kind of theorizing and developing in the early 20th century. You have the big names like Adler and Skinner, Freud, Winnicott, Kernberg, all these big names. And that all happened in a period of time from like 1930s to the 1960s and 70s. We understand so, and then in the middle of all that, neurobiology started to catch up and say, wait, not only is this happening in the way that we think about ourselves, but you can map it in the brain and see it in the brain. There is a connection between thought and neurology. Like, are we surprised by that? Of course there is. So all of this growth has just happened in less than 100 years. And then Sandra Brown comes into the scene about 2000, just recently, and starts to do this massive research into this whole topic. So if we were to say that psychology is a baby in infancy, I would say narcissistic abuse is still screaming in the operating room with the doctor. It's so new. There's so little really understood about it. We're just now starting to unpack what cognitive dissonance is and how to treat it. We're still unpacking exactly what happens with love bombing and and trauma bonds and how do you break a trauma. We're right now just beginning to start to understand this from a psychological, sociological research standpoint, which again is why I really think that you should be here tonight with Sandra L. Brown and hear the original thinker, the original pioneer in this whole arena. That means that most clinicians have not been trained. They've not heard of the word. They don't know the lexicon that we're talking about. It's all new to them. Because it's not even in the DSM-5. There's no recognition of this as a issue, a thing. There's no diagnosis. We call PTSD and CPTSD, but let's be honest, that doesn't really capture well what we're going through. That we're sort of that, but a little bit different. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It's kind of like that, but there's a slant on it. It's a unique slant on it. We certainly don't hold offenders responsible. There's nothing about this at a legal standpoint. We don't find this as we're now even saying, is this domestic violence? And yes, the answer is it's coming out to show that it's one of the worst forms of abuse, actually, because of the decompensation of self that occurs, the erosion of confidence and reality in self with actual neurological damage that happens to victims. So yes, it is actually an abusive experience, but there's so much that we still don't understand. So what are we supposed to do when you're looking for help? Well, I have some suggestions based upon the continuing education that I do. And I have taken Sandra Brown's seminar, and I've also taken Dr. Ramadi's seminar, and all the latest critical thinkers. I've been involved with continuing education, like 30 hours this last year of continuing education with these individuals, and doing a lot of reading and research of my own. I can make some recommendations of how to begin to find help and what therapy should look like if you find yourself in this type of a situation. First of all, if you're in an abusive situation, please do not get counseling with your partner. I know that's the first thing that we recommend when you are in a troubled marriage or a struggling relationship. And yeah, that's true. If you came in off the road and was talking to me about having difficulty with simple communication problems, being out of sync with your partner, the typical average stuff, maybe organizing your finances or planning, maybe like making life goals together, I would say to you, couples therapy has indicated that it would be very, very helpful to the two of you to be able to improve communication between the two of you and cement some better couple goals and learning how to negotiate the struggle between individuality and intimacy. That would be very typical. Or if you came in and talked about a few kind of sexual hiccups you were having, I would send you into a sex therapist, maybe a therapist with a specialty of both. That's just standard recommended treatment. But if you came in and start showing me signs that you were feeling afraid of your partner, that you had modified yourself, you weren't even for sure who your partner was or if this is a good relationship or not, I now know to recognize that as signs that you're probably being emotionally abused. I wouldn't have 10 years ago, never even heard of the topic. Here's one more thing I want to add. Here's the other shocking part about graduate training. I bet you didn't know this. Did you know there is not a standardized graduate study for psychologists? It depends on what your focus is. So there actually is this huge book called Graduate Studies put out by the American Psychological Association, what I use to find my program. It lists all the programs in North America, along with their entry requirements, the costs, the programming, what it looks like. But each program has so many candidates that allows in, so many students that are in that program, and each program has a specific specialty. They're not the same. Some will specialize in research only. It may even be bioneurological research only. Others might be studying, maybe they're very into behavioral. They're going to teach you how to affect behavior in a person, change behavior. It might be someone else, another program might focus exclusively on the psychodynamic theory or cognitive behavioral theory. Every program has a different study. In the book, again, it's called Graduate Studies in Psychology or something like that. If you go to the American Psychological Association's site, you will find it there. It's listed there, and I think there's an online version of it. But that's how you find programs in the United States. But there's not programs that specialize in abuse. That's too specific of a topic. You can find programs that specialize in family work. That's possible. Or counseling versus clinical versus school psychology versus forensic versus organizational psychology. See, psychology is massive. It's very huge. But you're not going to find something that specializes in personality disorders. In fact, most graduate school training spends almost no time to nearly no, maybe they bring it up in psychopathology, personality disorders when they're going through the DSM-5, they may say, oh, and in addition to depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia, here's personality disorders. But you're going to find it's a rare program that spends much time on personality disorders. My program back in the 80s, thank God, was on the cutting edge. It still is. It's a fantastic program. I think the world of where I graduated from, and we spent a lot of time on it, partly because they'd hired adjunct faculty who actually wrote books on the topic. So I was getting the material from people who were thinkers, writers, experts in these topics. So I happened to get, in the 1980s, which is wild because if you know when the DSM-3 came out, that's when we even first created the diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. I was right on the edge in being able to learn about personality disorders. Now, my understanding of it was taught from a developmental standpoint, not from a biosocial standpoint. So I've had to get up to date on what the research is, what we're thinking about the cause, the etiology of personality disorders now. So I say all that to say, that's why you're struggling finding a therapist who knows a lot about this topic. Because most therapists haven't received specialized training in personality disorders, and the topic of narcissistic abuse is new. So you are struggling. You've already realized that you're in a relationship with a partner who has narcissistic traits, although you can't diagnose them, but you realize that you're in a relationship with somebody who's got traits and you need help. What are you supposed to do? So here's how I suggest that you find a clinician. And this is why I often recommend coaching over clinicians, because a lot of coaches have come out of their own experiences and then decide to get an expertise in this area, which is why then they're focusing on it. Now, I'm not saying coaches and therapists are necessarily the same, but I think sometimes the crossover is very wide and very generous, and you can do well by a coach, maybe sometimes in lieu of a therapist. But this is how to find a therapist with a specialty in this topic. You want to ask them a few test questions. First of all, change the mindset that you go in when you're looking for a therapist. I know, I still feel it when people meet me, and I wish they didn't do this, but I do it too, so I get it. They find the word of psychiatrist or psychologist intimidating. People think that I see through you and that I know things that you don't want me to know. Well, yeah, I can't not see what I see, but I'm not sitting around. Think about it. Do you go home and work? I'm not working. I don't want to work when I'm off. So I'm not going around and trying to cure the world or analyze you. But I know that when you step into the office, there's a power inequity. You know you're paying this person for their training, their experience, their knowledge, and their expertise. And what happens when we go into that mindset, we create a power inequity in which they are higher than we are. And we assume then that they have authority and that they know better than we do. So I'd really like to have you change that. I'd like you to see them as, I'm laughing because one of my subscribers said, I'm not psychic either. No, I'm not psychic. And nor do I offer psychic readings, guys. If you ever see anybody offering psychic in my name, it is not me. They're a fake profile. Please report them because that's not me. But anyway, back to the topic. But be really aware of this white coat syndrome that we often have. I have it too. I'll tell you, I sit down with a social worker and psychologist. I'm intimidated. Sometimes I have more education than that person and I'm still intimidated. So I know it's a very natural thing for us to do to view the power inequity, but I really want you to change the mindset. And this is how to do it. When you go into that appointment, I want you to say to yourself, I'm interviewing this individual. This is an interview, and I'm making sure this is a good fit. Just by your reminder of that reminder to yourself will help you set the tone and set the frame in a different way so that you give yourself a little bit more power when you meet this person. And I also want you to think of that you're going to be asking them some big questions that they have to answer correctly. And if they can't answer these correctly, no shame, no criticism to them. It's just not a good fit. So here's the questions. I'm going to slow down. So if you want to write these down, you can. Because I know I talk fast and I'm nervous about the webinar tonight. So I'm really sped up today. So I'm sorry about that. The first question you want to ask is, ask them directly how much they know about narcissistic abuse. Have they ever heard of it? Just flat out ask them that. And then say, do you know the words that most people on social media are using about narcissistic abuse? Do you know what it means to be hoovered? Have you ever heard of breadcrumbing? What do you know about love bombing? Just ask them these test questions just about the terminology. Somebody who knows something about this should know those words because that means that they have been in this realm and have been studying and listening to you, to this topic, to Dr. Ramani, to Sandra L. Brown. They will have been listening and keeping up with the latest. So just flat out ask them. The next thing I want you to ask them, and this is a trick question. What do you explain to me who a codependent person is? Explain to me who a codependent person is. Okay, let me tell you why that's a trick question. I know it's popular here to think that that's a fair way to describe victims, but it actually is inaccurate. Sandra Brown tonight's going to tell you why it's inaccurate. It actually comes out of addiction model, out of codependency refers to what happens to loved ones around the addict when they start to try to manage the addiction so that it has less damaging effects on the family and on the relationship. They become ill together with the addict. And that's why they used to call it co-alcoholic. Now they refer to it as codependent. It wasn't until Melanie Beattie's book, Codependent No More, that it shifted and started describing any kind of excessively accommodating relationship. But really that's an unfair use of it. It misunderstands the dynamics of what happens in a toxic relationship. Yes. So enablers would be another word that's used for codependency. Again, enabling has to do, you enable the addict. You enable by protecting them from the worst negative consequences of their addictive behavior. That's where it comes from. So I know, say you can be codependent with addictions. Pony Thunder, I'm telling you why I disagree with that statement. It's a fuzzy term. If you research it in Google, you're going to find, yes, it's a pop psychology terminology that doesn't mean anything. There is no research on it. There is no firm definition. It's not in the DSM-5. And it actually has become a way in which we attack and slander victims. It's a way for us to say it's the victim's fault for what happens. No, it's not. And when you understand the dynamics of what happens in abuse, in this emotional, exploitive, deceptive practice that happens between abuser and their target, you'll understand why the target is actually no longer in power and no longer aware what's happening to them. They're not enabling, they're being duped, they're being conned, they're being hypnotized and mesmerized. So we're holding someone accountable for the hypnosis of themselves. And that actually is kind of doesn't make sense. You can't be, if you're being mesmerized and duped and conned, you're not accountable. You can't be accountable for that. That's why I think these terminologies, they're used actually by predatory people as a way to dismiss and to kind of dismiss what they've done and for us to distract from the problem of looking at their behavior. That's why I really have problems with this language. So ask them that. And if they begin to tell you, well, codependent is anybody who's people-pleasing and not set good boundaries, God bless that clinician, but please don't stay with them because they're not going to give you good help. They're going to gaslight you and make you feel responsible for the abuse that's happening to you. And I don't want that happening to you. That's going to make you feel crazier and worse than before. And I know because it happened to me, for one, so I know what it feels like. But two, a lot of you DM me and tell me what your experiences are like and how awful those experiences have been and how not helpful and how much worse you felt after you got that kind of therapy. So please ask that test question. And if that's how they respond, then this is not a match. What you want to ask them is, are they, and I'm going to slow down again and say this really slowly, are they betrayal trauma informed? Betrayal, like you've been betrayed. Betrayal trauma informed. That's the new thinking that's come out, probably started coming out about 15 years ago. It has to do with what happens in psychological relationships when there is this massive betrayal of one partner by the other, when they have actually created a whole system, like almost like a double life, and they lead you to think that this is what this really is happening in the relationship when it really is this. They make you think that they're invested when they're not. They make you think that they're monogamous when they're not. They make you think that they love you when they're actually not loving you at all. And they're doing deceptive things behind your back that are betraying and undermining the relationship. That causes a trauma called betrayal trauma. You're being traumatized by this chronic betrayal that's happening to you. And you may not even be aware of the trauma. It can be, but you're aware at some level, which is causing all of the like angst and uncertainty and confusion and the mental fog that you're feeling. You're sensing it at some level, but you're not really maybe being fully aware of the complete deception that's happening. So you want to ask, do they know about narcissistic abuse? You want to ask, what's their opinion about codependency? And are they a betrayal trauma informed specialist? That's what you do. Now, the last thing you want to look for is how does this, and this is always true about all therapists, okay? Irregardless of what you're looking for. So you may be looking for maybe an ADHD specialist for your child. Maybe you're going in because you're really struggling with anxiety symptoms. But so this is just good advice for everyone looking for a good therapist. How does this make you, how does this person make you feel? Are you feeling safe? Can you bring up the stuff that's really tough, that's uncomfortable, that you feel ashamed saying out loud? How do they respond? How do you feel about how they respond? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like they're listening even? I would pay attention to, do you even feel listened to? And does it feel like, do you feel like you're being judged? If you're not feeling safe at all these realms, then please, this is not a fit. You want somebody who really creates the mental space, the emotional space for you to bring everything in. Because I'll tell you, I've been in your position of being abused, and I was super ashamed. I felt there was things that he was doing that I didn't want to admit out loud, and I thought that if I had said that I would get criticized or put down. I didn't want my clinician to think less of me. So you need to really be in a space to feel safe. And here's the other thing to look for. Look for a clinician that doesn't overlead you and tell you there's a right way to do things. There isn't a right way to do things. 2 times, if you read my story, Love You More, you'll find that I had 2 different therapists directly tell me that, or nearly tell me I should leave. One went so far to even say to me, you're a weak woman. You're a stronger woman than that. You need to leave. That's what he said. You're a pushover. You're being a pushover. You're a good-looking woman. You'll find love again. Even that, by the way, he was a former sex addict who said that to me as a clinician. And I thought, you know what? It's not about how good I look or don't look. And it's not about whether or not I'll find love again. It's about the fact that I'm scared of this person and I'm scared of my life and I don't have a better plan. and I don't know what to do next. And you're telling me I should today, because he cheated again, walk out, and I have nowhere to go and he like didn't understand. You don't want someone who puts you in that kind of position and doesn't understand the impact of what they're recommending. You really, really don't. There is too many people who think just leaving is easy. It was the most terrifying thing I ever have done. When you guys come and you tell me how hard this is, I get it. I get it. Because for some of us, our life is on the line. It's not just our money, and it's not just our kids, it's our life. So I get this is not, you need a clinician who understands the danger you're putting yourself in by trying to leave. Seriously. Okay, so what kind of therapies are helpful? Because unfortunately, the normal idea of talk therapy as being the solution to healing to trauma after one of these relationships is not actually, the research is not supporting it. You want to find something that emphasizes the mind-body connection. Okay, somebody just asked, would I repeat those bullet points again? So I will start from the top and repeat the bullet points. When you're looking for a therapist after narcissistic abuse, this is what you're looking for. First of all, please know most therapists are not trained. So you're looking for a trained clinician, and this is how you find one. When you go into the first interview, assume you have the authority and that this is the interview. You're interviewing them more than they're interviewing you. You want to ask them, what do they know about narcissistic abuse? Secondly, you want to know what they think of the theory of codependency. That's a trick question. If they think that's explanation, then they're out. You want to know if they are a betrayal trauma-informed clinician. And then you want to ask yourself how safe this person makes you feel. Those are the ways of which to find a good clinician with this specialty. Now, what kind of therapy is indicated? Well, what's happened to you, and somebody asked me at another live about the polyvagal theory, and at the time I'd heard of the term, but I hadn't done much research, and then today I really slowed down to look at it and realized, oh, I've been explaining it, I just didn't have the words. It's a more synthesized understanding of the parasympathetic sympathetic system. I've been talking about that. I've been telling you have an on and off switch in your body. I didn't know it was tied to the vagus nerves. So yes, when you hear the polyvagal theory, you're hearing what we're describing is a kind of a neurological wiring about how we move in and out of fight or flight system. That we have a very sophisticated system that's constantly on alert for danger. And when it senses that there's danger, one nerve kind of activates you, moves you into a sympathetic mode, which is fight or flight, freeze or fawn. And when you start to feel safer, the other vagal nerves then activates the calming system, which is the parasympathetic system, which hopefully most of the time we're all in, because it's normal. It's what we should be in. But for those of us who've had a lot of trauma, unfortunately, this activation system, the vagus nerve system, gets out of whack and it doesn't operate very well. It becomes glitchy. We get stuck into the fight and flight, fawn and freeze mode. We don't move very well out of the fight or flight system we don't move into calmness very well. We don't move into more normal hormones and neurotransmitters that are related to a parasympathetic response. So how do we do that? How do we stop being so overcharged? And you can even see how I get overcharged sometime. And I've been a childhood survivor of catastrophic, extreme abuse that goes all the way back to when I was a toddler. So my system is very glitchy. I'm very prone to having problems with sleep, and I struggle with insomnia often. You can tell my weight's an issue. It's very hard for me to normalize and stabilize my weight. My sister passed away of inflammatory disease. I'm struggling with some inflammatory diseases. It's common when you have a lot of abuse for your body to get into this high state of arousal, which then sets off all this kind of metabolic problems and inflammation problems. So a lot of us are having issues with all sorts of inflammatory diseases. There's a whole list of things that I hear about, I know about. My sister had MS and then died of the complications of it this summer from it, just chronic trauma. I'm struggling with some mild forms of arthritis and I'm starting to show signs of diabetes. So it's just kind of this rapid kind of, the body literally gets exhausted. It gets exhausted from being in these high states of problems. I actually wore my hips out and have had 2 hip replacement surgeries. In fact, my doctor said, how do you and a 50-year-old woman ended up with 80-year-old pelvis? Well, that's why, because we have been chronically left in a high arousal state, and it's not meant to be there. So how do we readjust ourselves? You want to do therapies that do mind-body connection. That means cognitive behavioral therapy, talk therapy, those types of things are good. I'm not telling you not to have them, but they're not going to be as good at helping you readjust. My bone density is great. I have good bone density, but those things are not going to help you. So you want to do things that are mind-body. So I'm going to give you a list. Here's a list of what we have. And by the way, they're doing, again, this is a topic of research. So in the next few years, we're going to be learning a lot more about this whole arena, about how we can regulate, kind of reset ourselves. So I'm going to look, because I created this list, and this comes out of research. This list has been researched, and it's found to be very, very helpful. You want to use, these are some ideas, yoga, and there's even now a form of therapy of yoga. I don't know much about it, but I know that that's coming into existence. So look for yoga. Another one is mindfulness practice, really, really helps. Tai Chi. There's another one that I haven't heard. It's called, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, Qigong. It's Qigong. That's actually been researched. Massage therapy, even like the craniosacral kind of therapy. You might want to get some nutritional counseling and acupuncture. There's a list of things that have been shown to be impactful with helping us reset our trauma response, our vagal nerve problem that we get into. Oh, is it Qigong? Oh, thank you for saying that for me. I also would add to the list, and I know that it's not popular with me. I don't like it. That's why I wrote a book. I wrote a book instead of doing it, because that for me was my workaround, is that journaling. I highly recommend journaling, and this is why. And there was a fascinating research study on this. They took two groups of people who both had lost their job and looking for a job. The first group, they told just to write like a list. Every day they had to write a list. And another group, they talked with them. They had them write their feelings about looking for a job. That's what the task was. And they did this every day. They found that the group that wrote about their feelings every day about getting a job got a job within weeks, and the other group didn't. It took them months. They found that actually not only did it change their mindset, but it also changed the outcome, that they had a better outcome. I know that when I meet people and they find out that it's only been 3 years since I've been out of this abusive relationship with this guy, they're shocked. They're like, how did you get so far? And how are you so at peace? And why is it not plaguing you more? Well, because I spent 3 years writing the story and like immersing myself and rewriting and editing and, going over it. And then, I would take breaks and cry. I would make big aha discoveries. I mean, it was very, very cathartic for me. Yeah, I was living, breathing, and eating it, which you'd think, well, isn't that triggering? Yeah, somewhat it was. But it also really helped me to regain my sense of reality. It validated what I was experiencing. It got me in touch with my feelings. It really forced me to get out of the dissociation that I'd been doing, because I'm very good at that, and forced me to, because I had to convey it. You can't know how I was feeling in the book if I can say to you, how I was feeling in the book. I had to get in touch with my feelings. So that's in fact Bree's here, and Bree's an artist, a fantastic artist, and does amazing renditions and stuff. So that's another way. Find a way to connect with art or music or writing as a way to kind of connect with yourself and connect with the trauma, connect with your body, connect with your experiences and your emotions. And that will really augment healing. That's a big piece of the healing. And then the last thing I want to do to recommend this, and this is what I did right away. I knew to do this, and I did this right away. Please find an online community of survivors. Please find one. It is pivotal to you getting into others who understand, who are not going to gaslight you, minimize you, invalidate you, who will understand if you're saying you have a super bad day, who know how just cry with you, just to cry with you over what has happened or to be angry with you over what's happening. I spent 3 hours a week. That's how serious I took this. I spent 3 hours a week with a small group, which is why I now offer a premium private group. If you're a subscriber on Instagram or a subscriber on TikTok, or you become a member through Coffee, which is like Patreon, only it's ko-fi.com, and subscribe for $4.99 or $5 a month. I have a private group. We're going to meet once a month for video chats. I'm there. I hang out with you and talk. We talk about issues, and then we also get big discounts to upcoming webinars and online courses and books or whatever I put out. You get big online. So that's another way, is so that you find permission and space to be just yourself. That's so, so pivotal. I strongly, strongly believe in that. So there you go. There's my tips on how you begin to heal after narcissistic abuse and how to find a good clinician. Some of you have asked, is this going to be replayed? Yes, it's being taped right now, and I put everything in its full content over on YouTube. This one will go live on Tuesday on YouTube. You can find it. It'll go live at 2 o'clock Central Time on Tuesday. All right, so with all that said, let's see what time it is. Let's talk about what you're thinking of. Maybe you have a question about something that I said and didn't go far enough into it. Maybe you have another question that you would really like to ask me. Put a thumbs up in front of the question so I know you're talking to me and not talking to someone else. I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy, a psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. But I'm open the floor to whatever you want to talk about, and I'm kind of curious. I've been dreading my I put up a post that's about misogyny that's really controversial on TikTok today, and I already see that I put it up like a half an hour ago, and I already have 2,000 hits on it, which if anybody who posts content on TikTok knows that this week it's tanked. There's like no views. I don't know what, I think TikTok's rolling out some new things, and it's just, anyway, I've been nervous about going to see what people are saying because I can see a lot of men like, oh man, I may have pissed the men off, but we'll see. Oh, yes. Thank you for Jem's Design just said that so much. EMDR. Thank you. I forgot that. EMDR is also very pivotal when it comes for therapy. Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that. I highly recommend that. YouTube, you can find me if you YouTube has dedicated personalized handles that they now allow. So it used to be you had this whole big long string of numbers like youdo.com channel, blah, blah. Now it's Carrie McAvoy, PhD is my handles. So handle. So it's just the same handle that you find here. But also if you go to my bio and put me in, you can see the link. Yeah, no views, Brittany. I know it's been really, really awful. Yeah. So let's talk about it. Since it's somebody else, this is Sue B over on Instagram. That is exactly what it was about. I didn't come out and call men on sex addiction, but I was sort of hinting that this is an issue. But let's talk about narcissism and sexual addiction. I'm thinking about making that a whole topic to spend one of the lives on because it's a common problem. I used to think it was just a problem with my narcissist, but I'm realizing it's a problem with narcissists, that they use all sorts of addictive behavior. And since they're very, very entitled, and a lot of them are mostly men, and we all know how highly sex rates to men, are we surprised that sexual addiction is common among narcissists? I don't know what the rate of concurrence is, but I have a feeling that it's really, really high. And it makes sense when you think about it, because if you see people as objects and you're all about your own needs and pleasures, then why would you not then think that whatever you do sexually is completely permissible and okay, right? So I will dedicate a whole live to that and talk about it specifically. Like, what is it? Do I believe there's actually an addiction cycle? What happens? Is it the partner's fault? What often is happening to the partner and the relationship with the partner? I can talk. I mean, I focused my whole life for 2+ years on sexual addiction, so I know a lot about it, more than I wish I knew about it, unfortunately. Somebody asked what my definition of codependency is. Codependency came out of the out of the 12-step program way back in the 1930s. Originally, it was a reference to co-alcoholic. What happens is they believe that, and I've seen it, it's not what we believe, it's what we see. What happens is when someone begins to use whatever, whether it's gambling or a substance or something, they begin to get completely thrown into that, and they move themselves into destruction. They may consume all the money. Maybe they're no longer going to work. They start to decompensate. They start to show signs of deterioration. But that doesn't just stop at themselves. They're also affecting their whole family, their whole organization. So if they're part of a couple, it affects the couple. If they're part of a family, it affects the whole family. There's less money. This is what happened to my dad. My dad's mother married an alcoholic as a stepdad, and he would get paid and he would go to the bar and drink all night. And the family then would have no money for the next 2 weeks. And then on top of it, he would need to come home from the bar. So he'd often have my dad sleep as a 12-year-old in the back seat and then have to drive the truck home in the day. Now, why would anyone allow that to happen? Why would my grandmother put up with it? Why would she not put limits around that? See, she's participating without really meaning to participate by trying to get him home safely and not having legal bills, or by not kicking him out, or by not, you know what I'm saying? It makes the whole family ill around that. And that's actually codependency. That's why there's AA is called, I'm trying to think, I'm blocking on it. You know what so when you go to AA, there's a partner one that you go to. And then there's also one for children. You guys all know the names of this. I can't think of the name. That's codependency. It's also referred to as enabling behavior. And it has to do with an addiction model. Does healing require leaving, or can it start with a planning? Wendy, that's a really interesting question. I do think that it starts with the planning. I think that there's a state, there's a place that you hit with yourself where you start to break the cognitive dissonance and realize this person is dangerous or toxic or manipulative or deceptive. You kind of have this kind of aha that abuse is happening and that it's destroying you, and you begin to make plans to get out. Now that could take a long time. For me, it took me nearly a year. I still was trying to break a lot of the cognitive dissonance. So I think even that process can be prolonged. It can be like a building up until suddenly you realize, wow, this person isn't at all who they thought anybody that you thought they were. So I do agree it starts, but you can't fully heal your overcharged system, your overcharged body, until you get out, until you go no contact and they're not stirring you up and abusing you. Now, I know that's hard because a lot of us leave and then they threaten us with new things. They threaten us with legal abuse. They threaten us financially. They start to threaten custody. They jack us around with custody issues. Maybe the court's already made some decisions, but they still create more drama. So I know that this can be a very prolonged stage for us to get distance from them. But the degree that we start to come awake and realize what's happening is when this healing starts. But you really won't get good healing until they're not in their life, not in your life. And that's hard to achieve. And I think for some of it's not very feasible to achieve. But does that mean that you can't still heal? Oh, you can still heal. I think getting into group therapy helps. Slowing down, doing the mind-body treatment forms would really, really help. Continuing to work on your own, who you are and what made you vulnerable. And I say that very carefully because I'm not talking about just learn to set better boundaries. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what is your predisposition? What is it that you needed or wanted from that narcissistic person? What initially, when you met them, were you hungry for that made you vulnerable to them? So for me, what I was hungry for was I had just lost my late husband, and I really wanted a couple life back, and I was terrified of singlehood, partly because there's some realities to it. It's not just that I'm afraid to be alone. I'm actually not afraid to be alone. I've been alone most of my life. But I come from an autistic family. I'm autistic. I don't have extended family connections. Very much of them are very well. And I'm in a lot of ways emotionally orphaned in a lot of different directions. I don't have grandchildren. I don't have in-laws. My children aren't married, and they're all male. So when I cut myself off from my abuser, that meant I was going into a very lonely, very solitary life that may not have the things that you all normally have. You have built-in communities that come with your life. You have maybe grandchildren, maybe you've got in-laws, maybe you're very close to your siblings. My closest sibling now has passed away. So I'm orphaned in a lot of sense of my life. My community is you. My network is you. I don't have much, believe it or not, much beyond this. So I knew that when I left him, that's what I was stepping into, that I would step into this extremely lonely life that's alone. Not I'm lonely, but it's alone. And I was terrified of that. So it was really, really hard for me to do that, for me to be able to just do that. I've made peace with it. The pandemic has helped me a lot, interestingly enough. I had to live alone, work alone, see no one for over a year. I kind of got like, okay, I can learn to be okay with myself. I've learned to do that, but it's hard. I mean, when I hear all of you getting busy or like somebody, like my VA took a week off for her birthday. Like, who would even celebrate my birthday for a week? I don't have anybody to celebrate my birthday for a week. So, take it back. I went to Mexico with Ro. So yes, I did do that, but I don't have it built in. You get what I'm saying? I didn't have it built in. I have to build it in. And that's what I'm doing. I'm building in here. But yeah, it is hard. And it's something that most people can't relate to. So when people just told me just to leave, they have no understanding. They're telling me, go live alone on an island. Go be like Castaway, because basically that's what it's going to kind of look like. You're going to be on your own. Good luck with that. Sorry you don't have more. But I'm learning. I'm learning to make the best of that. But that's what nobody understands about your life. That's what you have your own challenges. He financially abused me, but yes, I have Brittany. He may have financially abused me, but I'm financially set. I'm okay. So he didn't destroy me financially. I know for some of you, that is your situation. That is, you're devastated. So my live's going to be starting here in about a minute over on YouTube. And that was the replay from Tuesday. So if you missed Tuesday and you want to go hang out with me, I chat. You won't see my face, but I chat and talk to people in real life time. And otherwise, I'm going to be back with you guys tonight at the webinar at 5:30 Central Time. And we will see you then with Sandra Brown. And I can't wait, guys. So I'll see you. Bye-bye. It's 5:30 Central Time, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. All right. Bye-bye, guys.